We've activated the uplink station. Well done.
I purchased Star Wars Battlefront in a recent sale, which is why I'm now doing this review. I did play Battlefront in beta prior to its release, and I have to say I actually enjoyed it quite a lot, but not quite enough to actually purchase it at release. I've linked my impressions of the beta in the description below, and many of the criticisms I raised about the beta actually still apply, because though I think Battlefront is undoubtedly fun, it's also a very shallow, repetitive and content sparse experience. Visually, Battlefront is excellent. It's easily one of the best looking shooters you'll play, and despite its impressive graphics, the performance is remarkably solid. If there's one thing that Battlefront truly excels at, it's capturing the magnificent spectacle of Star Wars combat. A big part of this is not only visual, but audio. As I said in my beta impressions, Battlefront wouldn't be half as good without the use of the Star Wars license, particularly when it comes to audio and music. This is a game that is significantly elevated beyond its rather shallow gameplay and weak content, thanks to the strength of its source material. But I have to say, I'm glad I didn't get Battlefront at release. Even with all additional post-release content, Battlefront feels very thin on the ground. Yes, there are a lot of modes, but outside of the 3 40-player modes, Walker Assault, Supremacy and Turning Point, everything else is essentially dead, and I can't imagine they were very active to begin with. Why? Well, because people enjoy the somewhat large scale that Battlefront has to offer. It's in those 40-player modes that the game really comes to life and immerses you in the middle of a spectacular and authentic Star Wars experience. Unfortunately, there's not exactly an extensive selection of maps, which wouldn't be such an issue if map quality was high, but instead we've got a handful of excellent maps with a handful of not so excellent ones. Thankfully, the few excellent maps do have a lot of replay value. Hell, I sunk nearly 20 hours into the Hoth Assault map alone during the beta. There's no class system and character customization is extremely weak. There's an extensive selection of weapons but very little variation, and some weapons are so clearly and objectively more effective than others that it's a little silly. The fact they are introducing classes and more unique and distinct weapon types in Battlefront 2 is a welcome change. I also hope they do far more with class and character customization. There's no single player campaign, once again a welcome addition to Battlefront 2, but there is a skirmish mode that lets you fight bots alone, offline, or with a friend, online, on the original Walker Assault maps. It's a nice addition because it means that you can still enjoy the game years down the line when the online is entirely dead, but I'm gonna have a little moan about it anyway. Why didn't they update Skirmish to include the DLC content? And why didn't they expand it to include the other modes? It feels a little half-arsed, and honestly, the bots aren't particularly great to fight with or against. Sometimes they just stand around and do nothing. The core gameplay, though a very basic and shallow shooter, is still fun. The online is still fairly active, at least in the 40-player modes, so you can currently find games fairly easily, although this may change come the release of Battlefront 2. It almost feels like a waste of time reviewing Battlefront at this point, especially when Battlefront 2 is coming and looks to have addressed many of my criticisms of the original. I'll be sure to give any beta a try, and I'd actually consider picking it up at release. The lack of a season pass is a good sign, but this is EA we're talking about, so they're sure to fuck it up somehow.
We know the power of the dark side.
Overall, it's hard to recommend Battlefront with Battlefront 2 just around the corner, but I picked it up in the sale for £8 and I've already put over 30 hours into the game. I've had a lot of fun in both skirmish and playing online, so I can't say I haven't gotten good value out of it. People cheating online is a problem, but it's not too prevalent. But it is clear at this point that the online aspect of Battlefront has largely been abandoned, so it's probably only going to get worse. Battlefront still feels in many ways like a beta, like a test run for Battlefront 2. And that's why I hope Battlefront 2 can deliver not only the high visual and audio quality we expect, but also improved and more in-depth gameplay, in addition to far more content. But until then, Battlefront 1 isn't a bad way to waste some time.
An enemy bomber has locked onto our AT-AT.